You good?
Hopefully. We'll find out.
Awesome. Cool. Perfect. Okay, guys. I'm gonna start with the next session. So that's cool. So yeah, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here. It's always exciting to be at Adopting Bitcoin. It was especially cool because last year we actually launched roughly at this time at the conference Albi, which is a Lightning browser extension, which I'm not going to talk about today very much. Quick to me, I'm Michael, or on the internet, I'm mostly called Boomy. You can find me on Twitter, GitHub, and so on. I work at Albi. As I said, one of our flagship products is more or less the browser extension, trying to bring Lightning to the web. But today we're going to talk a bit about value for value streams, and yeah, the monetization model behind that. I mean, we're a small group here, so yeah, we can also make it a bit interactive. If you have questions or comments on that, please bring it in. It's something generally, I would say, still very new, and especially in the Lightning world, that fits really well together. So it's always exciting to hear thoughts, and we will see what we do with that, or what we do with value for value in general. But before we get to that, I would like to take a quick step back, actually, which I think always helps to get the context around that. And because the web was always missing a native payment layer. So, and we actually see that in the HTTP spec, which was initially published 1991, I think. The version 1 was published 96, so quite old back then. Back then, the spec already said that this famous HTTP status code 402 is reserved for future use, because we didn't have the protocols and the tools basically to fill it with functionality. And interestingly also, Mark Andreessen of Netscape back then, one of his quotes today is the biggest mistake actually was in the browser that there was no way to have native money on the web, which meant that there was no economic interaction between a client and the server possible. So the client and server could not have an interaction, an economic interaction. It was only poorly about exchanging information. But with HTTP, we kind of had a standardized way to transfer information, but we didn't have any standardized way to transfer value. So to be online, we always have to transfer information, like a credit card number that I'm sending over, or I'm logging in to PayPal or something like that. And we always need an intermediary to facilitate the transaction. And what we saw is actually the standard made it possible. It lowered the barrier of entry for everybody to publish information online and to build web applications and websites and so on. So there was a lot of innovation happening around there. The barrier of entry and the friction was quite low, but whereas in the payment world, the friction was still quite high, and with that also the creativity and the possibilities were quite low. And this meant that companies had to move towards business models that were based around information, which meant basically advertisement. The most obvious result is that anything is monetized by advertisement. So we see that with every news website, which is cluttered with all the advertisement space and so on, or a lot of the podcasts and everything that we have online that we easily can transfer from all around the world. It's always cluttered with advertisement because we don't have a good way to monetize it in a decentralized way, especially because that meant because we didn't have that, this leads to more centralization. Because you need to have a big platform, a lot of knowledge about your users on any side, to monetize it really well. You need to know what the people want to buy, basically. You need to surveil them more or less to show them the right advertisement. It led to more advertisement. It led to especially more clickbait, because we need to make the people click on websites and so on. And it meant also less quality content, less indie creators especially, because there was no way to monetize content but also applications. And an interesting case here is, where I also would love to hear your thoughts on that, is actually because what that means is that the audience, here in the podcasting world, for example, the audience is not the customer. And not sure if you've been following that. There was this controversial discussion when BlockFi is bankrupt or not or whatever, but it got into trouble recently. And for many, one of the best Bitcoin podcasts here was selling advertisement space for BlockFi, the company, for a long time. And then the discussion was, there was not enough warning from the podcaster about the risks on that. So the company went bankrupt, a lot of the people were losing money, but the podcaster was advertising for that. And now the question is like, okay, there was not enough warning about the risks, and obviously the podcaster, because the company is the kind of the podcaster's customer, has no incentive to warn, basically, and the advertisement is not doing that. So the question there is actually, is that a problem or not? Because you could say that's kind of a self-censorship, what's happening there, because I'm getting paid not from my listeners, and I'm not responsible more or less for my listeners. A podcaster is there in the space of selling advertisement space. So, do you have any thoughts around that? Is that something that you also see? Is that a problem in your opinion? Anybody has a comment there? Yes.
It is a problem, but it is on podcasters and content creators. I believe they have a responsibility on who they work with. But the truth is that where we are, it's very hard to do it another way.
Yeah.
So I don't agree with Peter in this. Like there has to be some kind of responsibility.
Yeah.
At least that you have to accept that there will be an opinion built on your decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much. Yeah. You agree with that? So. Yeah. Yeah. I think the same thing, as I said. So, and my biggest point here is also that the incentives are often not really aligned. So, because you're not directly responsible to your listeners, you're also responsible to your customers, which are the advertisers. So that gives you basically money, and that's where, money is the power in that sense. But now I think a lot of these things can change, because we have Bitcoin and the Lightning network, which now brings this native payment protocol to the web. And we can see new ways of interacting, and especially we can now facilitate direct economic transactions between like the audience and the creator in that case, or like between the client and the server more or less, and we don't have to go to a different route to sell advertisement, or we don't have to go through certain intermediaries. So, and I think that's quite powerful and quite exciting. And another thing that we always see on the web is, besides the possibility even to pay, is that generally information wants to be free. That's the great thing about digital stuff. It can easily be copied, right? So bits and bytes, you can send them all over the place. It's expensive to create them, more or less. You know, record the podcast and be creative around that and create the content. That's the hard part. But then copying it and sending it around the world, that's the great thing that is cheap. That's why information always wants to be free and tends to also escape paywalls in that sense. So I don't know is there a beep going on? Okay, so better? Okay, and that brings us to the topic of value for value. maybe I must not move. That brings us to the topic of value for value, which describes a new way of monetizing content. So it's based on a new model that is based on this direct economic interaction. It's based on like free speech. It integrates hard sound money, and that's why it actually fits really well to the to that space. Okay, so a lot of things. It's kind of a new way to think about value. There is a pretty cool website actually that you should check out, Value for Value. I got it here, and that gives a good overview. So what is the value for value philosophy? It flips some of the existing value propositions on the head. So typically, normally you would say payment comes first before consumption. That's the first thing that value for value flips on the head. Payment comes after consumption, because especially for digital goods, it's easy to copy. That's why you can just visit the website, download the MP3 and so on. That's easy, that's cheap, and payment comes afterwards. So it's not pay to play, but it's play to pay, basically. And the second most important thing here is that the value is defined by the consumer and not the publisher. Because it's really hard actually to define the value of some content, some digital content, because it can be perceived really differently from whoever consumes it. And that's kind of what the value for value philosophy puts at its core. And at the same time, it's about no censorship. That's the censorship also not in the sense of somebody is blocking it, but also the self-censorship, because I'm responsible for advertisers. So because we have this real economic relationship between the consumer and the creator, we don't have the risk of the self-censorship, because somebody else might be pissed off what I'm saying. And it also integrates a big feedback loop. So because of this more direct interaction with the audience, it's not only about money and payment and monetizing the things, but it's a more direct relationship and especially interaction and feedback loop between the audience and the creators. And a lot of the criticism that you often hear when you talk about that is that most of the people will not give much or give anything. And I think it's still very much true. It's a new concept. Also, a lot of people have to get used to that, I would say. But it's also fine. Many don't give anything. Some give a little and some give a lot. So that's just how it is. So we kind of accept that in that regard, and it turns out well. So that's kind of the goal. So to sum it up, the value for value monetization model says monetization of non-scarce information is hard, because it can easily be copied. Bits and bytes can easily be replicated. Value is perceived very differently. And value for value transactions are always direct. They're voluntarily and they're unlimited. So nobody is there in charge. And it's a truly peer-to-peer interaction there. So information flows freely without restrictions, and people especially give for what it's worth for them. So one of the main people who is pushing that and also is point that part is Adam Curry. We'll come to that in the podcasting space now. He's calling it the new international lifestyle of value for value. And it mainly got attention in the podcasting space, the podcasting 2.0 space. And the podcasting space is actually a quite interesting one that fits really, really well to the concept of Lightning, and it fits really, really well to the concept of value for value, because it's a very diverse ecosystem. We have a lot of different players in that space, a lot of different companies, different recording tools, hosting companies, different podcasters, production companies, there are monitoring, analytics tools, and so on. and especially we have multiple touch points. So not only like I'm listening in my player, but I have a website and and Twitter, YouTube channels, and so on. So it's a very diverse ecosystem. There are especially no big centralized platforms around that. And this all works because we have protocols and standards, like especially RSS. Do you all recognize this, this one? I'm always wondering, because RSS is like also another super old standard, all from the end of the 90s, like really simple syndication, which basically just describes a computer-readable format, or describes content in a computer-readable format to be able to share it and read it in different clients. It's basically what made webblogs possible, what got big attention in the Web 2.0 space, but kind of got a bit forgotten also, I feel like, especially in the non-podcasting world. One person always to mention here is Aaron Swartz, that you also should know, and there is a good video film, Internet's Own Boy, that you also should watch if you haven't yet. And it's RSS is just this super simple XML file. And yeah, as I said, it's like from the 90s, end of the 90s, but thanks to Adam Curry here and a lot of the other people, a lot of things happen in that space. So they kind of initiated the Podcasting 2.0 initiative to bring new advancements to the podcasting space, to make sure the podcasting space stays decentralized, and it basically expresses a common goal how the podcasting world should evolve. What kind of new features we want to add to make a great experience for the listeners, and to make an even much better experience for listeners than they would have behind walled gardens. So what behind podcasting is mainly the two things. First of all, it's an open podcast index, an open directory of podcasts, and the second thing is all the different advancements out there, podcast namespace that adds new fields to the RSS standard for chapters, transcript, and so on. I'm not going through all of them. The interesting one is where we come to in a second. Oops, where did I go? But the point is protocols and standards for the win. We have Bitcoin and Lightning that fits perfectly as I said to that. We got HTTP RSS to transfer information. We got Lightning as a way to transfer the value now. And with value for value, we got now, it kind of describes the concept of how to monetize the kind of things. So quickly, how does it work? And here is a big shout out to Breeze and Fountain, that are one of the most, like the first players and the most innovative players in that space to implement that, to implement value for value in the podcasting space. So the idea here is that the podcaster adds Lightning information into the RSS feed and publishes the feed. The listener subscribes with whatever player they want. Breeze, Fountain are one of the, and Podverse are one of the known ones that support that concept, that support this podcast value tag, and they offer then the user to send this value for value payments, either a one-time payment, which is called boostergrams in that space, or it can be also payment streams, where you kind of send payments every minute while you're listening to that. And you can decide, the listener can decide the amount that you want to send. Is it just 1 satz a minute, or is it 100 satz or 1,000 satz? That's completely up to what it's valuable for the listener. This is how it looks like. So it's quite simple to implement. Simple podcast value tag. It mainly builds on the keysend functionality here, which can be like extended in the future, I guess. The default method here is keysend right now. Podcaster can say this is a suggested amount that I would like to receive, but as I said, it's completely up to to the listener. And then there's the value recipient. That's a nice touch here too, because there doesn't need to be only one recipient, but there can be multiple ones. So you can have basically split payments to all the guests of a podcast, or who did the artwork, or who did the production, and so on. So you can have multiple payments splits there. This is a full example where you have, like, I don't know, 6, 7 payment splits in there that go to the different audiences. And the nice thing here now is it's usable everywhere. That's the great thing about the standards and the interoperability. Because it's just stored in the RSS feed, any app that extracts information from there can use it and display it and allow apps to send payments. So here, for example, that's the Podcast Index website. They also have this fields down here that allows visitors. It's not a podcast player, it's just a normal website from the website to send over boostograms. And we also try to experiment to expand that it's not only, even though it's mainly used in the podcasting world right now, but to expand that for more parts of the web. So for example, we at Albi, we also support a Bitcoin, a Lightning meta tag that people can add to websites to say, hey, if you want to send Satoshis over, here is, in this case, a Lightning address to support the value for value ideas here. This is how it looks. In our case, here's a normal website, and Albi here provides then the option to say, bam, thank you for this article. We have to experiment there how often you want to do that, because the interaction is very different. So you're not listening to something ongoing, but you're just reading the article. So probably it would be more of a one-time thing than a longer thing that while you're reading an article. But all these things could be possible. Same goes for YouTube. We got here a YouTube channel that has integrated it. And that's the nice thing also, because we build on Lightning, right? So we can extract Lightning information from wherever it is. Here, for example, a YouTube channel description, or a YouTube video description, and directly allow the user to stream Satoshis over. And yeah, one last thing here to mention. It's not only about payments, even so I talked a lot about the value here and payments and monetization, but it's really about the interaction between the audience, the listener, the consumer, and the creator and the publisher. And have to a real economic relationship, but that also means that you can, for example, attach data to payment streams, which can be messages. Which is the idea that you basically boost the engagement with the audience through this economic interaction, through sending sats over. And to mention one app which René was building, also part of our team, is Saturn, deployed here, which tries to analyze this metadata that is in there, because clients can send information like a name or a timestamp when it was sent, or to which episode or which article things were sent. And so it really becomes also very valuable information for the creators to analyze what people are looking at, listening at. I think I have a screenshot in here. That's how it looks like. Who are the top contributors? What are the top episodes that somebody is listening in? And no, we're not going to do a coding session. I wanted to show one more screenshot here, which is down here, which is this one. Where you can also put it actually on a time scale. So during and here in a podcast episode, where did people stream sats? Where did they send messages over? Having the direct messages that you actually then also could integrate into podcasts and so on. So yeah, I hope this is a rough overview of the idea. And we got 2 minutes left. I think if you have comments or questions, please. Yeah.
Is this info coming directly from the node, or where are these payments appearing?
So in the podcasting world, they're using key send payments. And this is basically, it's described in a blip, so it's an extra custom record where an encoded JSON is sent along in the key send payment. So this information is actually coming directly from the node, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
As far as I understood, it's at the moment mostly desktop browser-based or app-based. So in an app you can, like a podcasting app, you have to build it, or in your native app, like you also can build it. How about, can you give an outlook on what may happen with iOS Safari in the future, depending on what Apple does, and also what in Android Chrome? Is there developments? Do you see future? Because when it comes to publishers, your most traffic is on mobile web.
Yeah, in terms of non-podcast content. Yeah. That's a very good question. It's a very good topic. I mean, the general idea that we kind of have is that we will see more applications integrate with Lightning wallets. So a user brings a wallet to an application to facilitate the payments in there. And then hopefully this will also be more possible. It always depends on where you read the article. Like mobile is definitely a hard one. So because either you have like an app, and there maybe also with a new monetization models, reader applications will be more interesting again, like RSS readers on the mobile. So you can imagine like a podcast player that integrates Lightning. You could have an RSS reader or a reader application, that an aggregator, let's call it that way, that also integrates then Lightning and allows people to send payments. Or we will potentially also see, I don't know, browser-based ways to integrate Lightning. But that's still kind of a hard topic for sure. Yeah. No good solution right now on that. So, but the nice thing is also like the problem is the streaming part, but you can also just have you know, on click open the wallet and so on. The interaction is a bit more tricky there, but it goes in that direction. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Saturn is great, amazing, and it changed everything in my opinion a little bit, because before there was not at least that I know. A cool tool that you can put everything in and that you can see it and interact. So this is great, and I believe that we need better Saturn and we need more tools like Saturn, because we need a hub like the Thunder Hub did for liquidity and so on. But for value, we need a hub, and Saturn so far is the best example. But with all the possibilities, with your own node, with right now you use Aldi and so on, and it's great. It works. I've been using it for 2 months and a half, and I love it. But this for me is a game changer. Like since I use Saturn, value for value in my head exploded, and to my users the same.
Nice.
I transfer this information to them in every podcast, and I see it's.
Yeah. Nice. That's awesome to hear. Yeah. It definitely is this interaction that you can have with the audience and integrate this information into the whatever you're creating there. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. I guess you are waiting. So thank you very much for listening. And you all should use value for value podcast players like Dries.